Hi, everybody. I recorded. I'm Scott Brassart. Excuse me. Start off with the cough. Always good. Um, we're going to talk. Last week, Tammy and I filled in, and I mentioned maybe the next time I would talk about the neurobiology of addiction. And we're kind of going to do that today. But I was teaching my sex addiction level one, part one group last night, and we were talking about the cycle of addiction, and we often get sidetracked on the high of addiction. Because and I always forget, because 20 plus years sober from this addiction, I always forget what a revelation it is to understand, oh, this is what's happening. This is why I completely lose touch with reality. This is what's going on. To see the look on the guy's face, it's like, oh my God, that's me. um, I thought, you know what? Let's talk about that this morning, um, because I know we have a mix of addicts and betrayed partners here, and I think it's very useful information for both. Um, you know, the more we know about addiction, whether we're the addict or the betrayed partner, the better off we are. So I'm going to talk about the high. And one of the things, like when I came in to recovery, in 2000, I was like, how can sex be an addiction? I mean, I get it when I smoke pot and drink. I'm putting a substance in my body. I'm manipulating my neurochemistry. I'm getting high. I'm escaping. I understood that, but you know, sex is just, you know, there's no substance. How can I be high from this? How can I be an addict? Um, and the example was given to me, and I'll use the same example. Was, let's say I'm a cocaine. By the way, I'm not my drug of choice, but it's Friday, it's payday. I know I'm getting paid today. I've already texted my dealer, so I know he's holding. And I've also gone online and shopped for prostitutes. So I've got that lined up, and I've got a hotel room arranged. And Tammy's our HR director. She's not, but let's say she is. And we're old school. We do paper checks. We're not, but let's say we are. So she walks in with my paycheck. I say, "Oh, thanks, Tammy." We chit chat for a minute. And as soon as she's out the door into the next office, I'm out the back. Even though I've been warned about this several times, work ends at 5 on a Friday, not 4:45. But I want to get to the bank, and I got my checks on. Zip, zip. I'm out of there. I'm zipping off to the bank. My heart's pounding. I'm all excited. Go to the bank, and instead of putting money in the bank for rent and child support, and I cash the check, cash it. Even though I really need to pay some bills. Um, and then I'm like, I drop a quick text to my dealer on the way, hop in my car. I'm driving a little fast, my heart's pounding, I'm sweaty, I'm all excited. I get there, the terrible neighborhood, because that's where cocaine dealers live. Um, I park, I don't even notice there's a police car 2 cars away, don't even see it. Go up, ring the bell, go in, do the deal, shove the drugs in my pocket. Head back to the car, still don't notice the police officer, pull around, go pick up my prostitutes, go to the hotel, check in, you know, sit down, we start chopping up the coke, we roll up $100 bill, because I'm not gauche, I'm not using like a five. We're gonna use 100 because I'm cool. Um, and then me and the prostitutes start doing the coke. So the question that was asked to me after this scenario was, when are you high? And I initially thought, as soon as I do the coke, right? And then I started thinking about it. It was like, oh, I'm high on Wednesday, 2 days ago, when I'm texting my dealer, because you know my thinking is distorted. I'm having intense feelings and emotions. I'm distracted from the real world, and the whole point of addiction is distraction from the real world, is escape from the real world. I want to escape my stress, I want to escape my anxiety, my loneliness, my boredom, all of those things. And I use my addiction to do it. I'm high way before I put the substance cocaine in my body. I'm high just thinking about it. It's an anticipatory high. And we can actually hook someone up to an fMRI scan, like a little brain scan. and we can see what's happening in somebody's brain. Um, and first of all, if you hook an addict up when they're not using, not even thinking about it, you can look at their brain and say, "Oh, you're an addict," because certain parts of the brain are overdeveloped, certain parts of the brain are underdeveloped. It's like going to the gym; you work out certain muscles. The brain is a muscle, so you can tell somebody's an addict. What's more, you can tell what kind of an addict they are. If you're an alcoholic, I can say, "Oh, that one's an alcoholic." They're an opiate addict. Opiate addict, very similar to alcoholic, very similar actions and reactions in the brain. But if you know what to look for, you can tell the difference. They're a cocaine addict. Ooh, that one's a cocaine addict. Except I might be wrong about the cocaine addict. The cocaine addict might also be a sex addict or a porn addict, because cocaine addict brains and sex addict, porn addict brains look exactly the same. They're indistinguishable. I mean, you cannot tell the difference. The high is exactly the same. The overdevelopment and underdevelopment of the brain is exactly the same. And the activation of the brain when using or when anticipating use is exactly the same. Now, here's a really tricky one. If I hook me in the example of up to the fMRI scan, when I'm sitting in the hotel room, I got my ladies of the evening and my cocaine all laid out, but I haven't done any cocaine yet. You look at the fMRI scan, I am exactly as high in that moment as I am 30 seconds later after I've done the cocaine. The anticipation of doing the cocaine and having the sex gets me just as high as actually doing it. That is the whole high of sex addiction. That's what we want to talk about today. When we talk about the cycle of addiction, we start out triggers. Oh, I'm anxious, I'm lonely, I'm bored, I need some excitement in my life. That's the trigger. So I slide forward into sexual fantasy. And in my example, I'm sliding forward into sex and or drug fantasy on Wednesday, when because I know I'm getting paid on Friday. I know I'm going to party this weekend. So I'm already getting a little bit high. I'm manipulating my neurochemistry already, just being in the fantasy. I'm getting a little dopamine hit. I'm getting a little adrenaline hit, particularly with sexual fantasy. That gives you the adrenaline, which heightens the dopamine. I'm getting a little bit high already, just thinking about it. And I can do that off and on for a couple of days. Probably Wednesday through Friday, I'm off and on high on my fantasy, for a couple of days. The deeper I get into my fantasy, the higher I get. And oh, by the way, in my fantasy, nothing bad ever happens. There are no consequences. I don't get caught. Everybody's hot, including me. Nobody has bad breath. Nobody pulls a muscle. I mean, it's a fantasy, and fantasies are perfect. Not realistic usually, but perfect. And they get me high. And then I start ritualizing. One of my steps that I take is I text the drug dealer. I get an extra dopamine bump from that because my fantasy is elevated. I'm taking steps toward acting out. And then I shop for prostitutes every time I go online and swipe left, swipe right, read a review, do whatever. I'm getting a little bit more high. And what happens is I find myself in what I describe as a bubble or a trance. I always picture myself with a pretty good sized fishbowl on my head. And it's just me and my sexual fantasy that is elevated every time I take a step toward actually acting out. And every time, by Friday at 2 p.m., I'm high as a kite. There's no drugs in my body. There's no prostitutes yet. But I'm in this fantasy state. I have completely escaped. I'm unproductive at work. I can't wait to get out of there. I'm already, my pits are sweating, not to be gross, but you get the idea. I mean, I'm high. I have escaped the real world, which is the whole point of addiction. And I will, I can stay high for days. A typical sex addict will look at porn for 3, 4, 5 hours before actually masturbating to orgasm. Because when I have the orgasm, the bubble that I'm in with me and my fantasy, the high, it pops. And suddenly I'm thrown back into the real world. And that is not the goal of my addiction. The goal of my addiction is escape. And I'm escaped when I'm in the fantasy. And I always love watching the addicts going, oh my God, I thought this was about the sex. It's not. It's about everything leading up to the sex. The sex is often a disappointment, which is a whole other webinar. Um, we don't get nearly as much pleasure from the actual sex as we get from the high. An orgasm gives us less of a dopamine rush than the fantasy high. The fantasy high is much bigger than the orgasm high or the orgasm dopamine hit. So this is the high of sex addiction. It's anticipatory, it's fantasy based, and it can be dragged out for hours or days or even weeks and months. Some of my guys who travel for work, you know, I got a trip in December to such and such, and you know, I know that so and so is going to be there, and she always is flirty with me. You know, we're already in contact, we're making lunch plans. You know, I'm high off and on all the way from now until December, fantasizing about what might or might not happen. This is the high of addiction. And this is also the hurtful part for betrayed partners. I'm spending all this time escaped from the world, escaped from my, not only my work and my stress, but my life and my relationship. I'm spending all this time with my fantasy and none of this time with you, my partner, who I love. But you know, yeah, I need to escape. It's why alcoholics drink. Alcoholics don't drink because they like the taste of alcohol. Drug addicts, you know, don't shoot up because they like needles. I mean, nobody likes needles. I don't. Sex addicts, this is not about sex. It's not about the orgasm. It's about escaping from life. And that is an anticipatory fantasy high. It starts as soon as we're triggered, we start fantasizing, and then every step of ritualization that we take toward acting out elevates the high until we're as high before we actually act out as we are when we act out. So, all right, that's enough for me. We've got some questions in there. It looks like
Well, I
Tammy
know, but
probably
I've
has
got
questions.
some questions for
I
you
know
on
do.
what you shared. Yeah. So, because you said, you know, in the brain, you can tell like alcohol, but we have guys that come to us that, you know, cannabis, alcohol, and sex or porn. So is there a difference in a brain that is doing kind of both areas? You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah, and it's harder to tell what's what in that because they're going to have multiple things going on. But yeah, I mean, if I'm drinking, I'm going to have that part of my brain activated. If I'm also doing drugs and if I'm also sexing, so yeah, I mean, it's going to be a little bit more of a mess. I mean, you know, and harder to tell what's going on because there's going to be a
Yeah.
lot, and there's always a lot of overlap. I mean, it's very similar, whatever the addiction. But
Yeah.
usually, if somebody's a one track addict, you can tell what they are.
Yeah. I'm probably still waiting to meet those people because I find that
I
compulsive
know.
behaviors. I mean,
we're
yeah,
all a
yeah,
garbage. I'm a garbage can, you know.
yeah. I mean, and people go, "This is my problem," and then there's more. So, you know, it really, and I appreciate, you know, with our treatment program, we're really assessing across things because, like in the example you used too, you know, like money and work issues, you know, those are complications, you know, of addiction, but it's also part of, you know, patterns where people are underperforming or they get a lot of, attaboys at work, and so they're, you know, workaholics, so to speak. So both sides of that, you know, that equation, but also the, you know, the money issues of like, yes, I got my paycheck, and rather than, you know, being responsible and paying the bills, I have chosen to, and again, we get lots of guys that call, you know, the program, and if they have money, they're not calling, and if they don't have money, they're in the after cycle and going, I desperately need help, you know, but as soon as they get money again, they go act out, you know, and that's, you know, that's the trick. I was thinking
Just
too,
let's
go ahead.
pause for a second and do a
Mhm.
shameless plug. In terms of cross and co-occurring addiction, sex addiction plus usually a substance addiction, um, there are facilities out there who will tell you they are expert and they treat both of these. They're not. We are the only facility that actually knows how to treat this co-occurring addiction of sex and drugs. Okay, shameless plug
Well,
over. If
yeah,
you know somebody who's a sex and drug addict,
yeah.
please send them to us because they're going to end up with us in 6 months anyway.
Yeah, yeah, and you're right. We have lots of people who have tried, substance, programs or whatever. But we've had guys that struggle with eating disorders and gambling or gaming, all of those things, and we're looking holistically across all of them because, you can't be happy, joyous, and free and actually living in recovery if you're still hanging on. We get guys who have been sober, from alcohol. I mean, I get this regularly. I've got X amount of years, sober from alcohol, but they've been acting out. So I said, yes, you've got abstinence from alcohol and you're still in active addiction. Just all that dopamine that you're talking about, and I was thinking, I often, we talk about, the 3 circle plan and, the acting out piece is the smallest circle. And I'm thinking when you're talking about being in the goldfish bubble, your world is really small. And, so what we're asking addicts to do is give up the smallest things it's the highest intensity. And Dr. Rob talks about that all the time. Addicts seek intensity rather than intimacy. But we were talking about giving up the smallest things, and having a world that is, it is connected. And Dr. Rob uses an analogy of in addiction our world is black and white and shades of gray, and in recovery we get the technicolor world. And so while addicts are going, no, I need to hang on to this, I need to hang on to this, because it's all about that escape. It's really, if you are willing to let go of things that aren't serving you well, you get so much more than you can even imagine. But it's challenging. I was also, you talked a little bit about the after, and I'm like, yeah. And so let's play out that analogy. Now you've spent all your money, and you have child support and rent, and your landlord is, knocking on your door, and the court is going, you owe child support, and you're like, I don't have any. And so, so and also I realized you go, okay, but my next paycheck is coming in 2 weeks or whenever. So it's always I'm going to start planning out, how I'm going to act out again, because my world is very difficult, often because of the choices, and behaviors. But, there's that after of like, ugh, like I have no money and I can't eat.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, the stage after we act out, after the bubble pops, is called despair. And it's called despair for a reason because, it's like the whole world comes crashing down. Whatever stress and anxiety I was escaping with my addiction in the first place is still there. Plus, there's a fresh layer of it from, oh my God, I did it again. I feel powerless. I'm broke. You know, back to the juggling. Addicts are expert jugglers with life and addiction. We put everything in a little compartment and we juggle. And we,
yes.
I mean, I've never seen the movie, but the title of the movie is I'm Dancing as Fast as I Can. And I always think, oh my God, that's my addiction. And I think the movie's about addiction. I should probably watch it at this point. But I think what a great title, because that's what it's like sometimes, is trying to make everything look okay, you know, while still being an active addict.
Yeah. 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 And the other side is if we get the help that we need. But to your point too, and you said it, it's like, I didn't start acting out the moment, like when you got the cocaine in the hotel room. It's way back here when I first started giving myself permission. I
Mm-hmm.
felt slighted. I feel, no
Yeah.
one understands me. I'm unique. I need whatever the reason
Mm-hmm.
is, it's back up. That's where it happens, not in the moment when someone's using. So,
Yeah.
okay, first question, Scott. What are betrayed partners doing after the first time an established boundary is crossed? I don't want to be punitive or shaming, but won't allow it again. We've spoken with our CSAT and husband is remorseful. Put an extra layer in place. This involved a woman, but not sexual.
Okay. Boundaries are I set a boundary to protect myself. It's not about controlling your behavior. It's not about punishing your it's, let's say Tammy has cheated on me. And so I say, Tammy, I need to feel safe in our relationship. If you cheat on me, or this is my boundary that, you flirt or whatever it is, I will respond by asking you to sleep in another room for at least a week and maybe longer until I feel safe enough to let you back in our bedroom. Um, this is not punitive. It's not shaming. Tammy has been warned. I have a need to feel safe in my relationship. Here is what I'm going to do to protect myself. Um, if you do this, I'm not telling you you can't do this. I'm just saying, here is how I will respond to protect myself. So I never look at boundaries that are worded that way as punitive or shame. Um, you know, uh, it's protecting me. My boundaries are about me. They're not about you. My boundaries are about me and me staying safe. Now, a good boundary, you mentioned putting an extra layer in place. The good boundary is I need you to not flirt with women when we're out to dinner. I don't know what happened here, but let's say that's it. Because it makes me feel unsafe. If you do that, I will ask you to double down on recovery by, scheduling an extra therapy session and going to an extra meeting every week, putting an extra layer in place. And I need to know you're doing that. Otherwise, I can't feel safe. And if you don't do those things, I will ask you to move out of the house or whatever it is. So don't ever view your boundaries are not about punishing the addict. Boundaries are about you staying safe. And you need to do what you need to do to stay safe or to feel safe. Um, why would you want to be around somebody who makes you feel unsafe? So anyway, that's my thought. Tammy,
Yeah, no, and I agree. Boundaries are absolutely about safety, and they are not punishment. So yes, I can understand that. If he's not able to honor your boundary, he's crossed the boundary. Then, that will distance you, the two of you, so if an addict has crossed a boundary, then it is so much more helpful if because you said he's remorseful. Well, that okay, but what does that mean? Is he, okay, I'm going to do 90 meetings in 90 days again. I'm going to, I'm meeting, I'm doing an extra session with my CSAT, and and I hear our CSAT, so I hope he's got his own, so that he can double down on the, there was something again, like we were just talking about, where he gave himself permission back here, not when he did whatever, but he gave himself permission. Oh, I've been a good boy. I've been doing my, recovery work, and our relationship is going better. So, I deserve, that's a pretty common one. I deserve to do whatever, or, I'm going to be a little lax on my recovery work, and, it catches up. So yeah, if an extra layer is, you're sleeping in the guest room until, him being, I usually think kick him out, but whatever you need to do. But yeah, and like like it happened at dinner. I don't want to have meals with you for a bit. I need to take care of me. I'm going to go have, dinner with my girlfriends. I'm taking care of me. It's my safety. And I always say healthy boundaries are physical, emotional, financial, and spiritual. Troy
yeah,
Love uses relational, and I think relational, spiritual, whatever those are, but those boundaries are your safety. And someone not being able to meet that, and early in recovery, that is
yeah,
honestly the case. So then it's just, what do you need to do to create that safe space? It creates a bigger gap. I want to vision us being together, but right now I need to take care
yeah.
of me.
Yeah, Tammy, thank you for hitting on the word remorseful. One of the boundaries is often I need you to be honest. I need to be able to trust you at some point down the line. So I'm always coaching guys, you got to come clean when you do something.
Mm-hmm.
Here's how you come clean. This is what I did. I'm sorry. And then you tell your partner what you're doing about it.
Yes. Yeah,
Because
it's
I'm
the action.
sorry is not enough.
No.
I did this. I'm sorry. I am going to double down on meetings. I am going to journal about this. I've spoken with my sponsor already. I'm making sure you know, and I'm working to not behave this way again. Here are the things I'm doing. That's the important part of coming clean. What am I doing about it?
Yes.
I'm
Or I
sorry
feel
doesn't cut
so
the mustard.
bad. The other one is I feel so bad. Oh, woe is me. It's still all
When will
about
you
him.
forgive
I know.
me?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So it really is. And I'm sorry my behaviors have hurt you. Is
Mhm.
I would, I'm
Yeah.
doing what I need to do today so that I can
Yeah.
learn to do things differently. And here's what I'm doing. The doing action is always, lips moving is not helpful. So,
Right.
okay, Scott, next one is when my essay husband was in active addiction, he would message 5 to 10 acting out partners to ask if they had time, and then when they would reply, he would tell them it's not a good time. I'm guessing this is part of the addiction cycle.
Yes. You
Yeah.
guess correctly. Look, um, the hunt is the high. I mean, this is when guys light up when I'm teaching this course. They're like, "Oh my God, it is about the hunt. It's not about the action. It's about the hunt." Um, when hookup apps came out, I had a conversation with Rob, and there was we're like, we need to know what's going on here. We need to look at one of these things, and I think he was the brave one who downloaded it. Um, and we looked at it, and I can't remember which of us said it, but it was like, oh my God, these are crack. Because it's just this endless stream of fantasy. Porn is the same way. It's this endless stream of fantasy. And this whole, texting the partners, it's this endless stream of fantasy. The fantasy is the high. Actually, hooking up with them is not. It's the fantasy, it's the prep, it's the hunt. I have guys tell me all the time, yeah, I'll spend days and days, shopping for a prostitute online, reading all the reviews, doing this, planning. I make the appointment, I get the money, I go, and then I don't have sex. I just give her the money, we talk for 3 minutes, and I leave because it's not about the sex. It's the fantasy, it's the buildup, it's the hunt. So yeah, he's in the fantasy ritualization stage. The payoff for him is probably eventually masturbating rather than actually hooking up. Um, but yeah, that's absolutely the high of the addiction right there. Any
Yeah.
thoughts?
No, I do. I like the swiping. Like I hear that all the time. And just being on the apps and looking, and but those connections are absolutely, the dopamine is definitely engaged. So
Mm-hmm.
okay, the next one, Scott. Do the addicts get high with the cover up? High when their partner is oblivious, high knowing they have hidden condoms in the truck for the next time, even though they swore to themselves they would stop?
Um, this is an interesting question. Um, they've done research on um, they get little kids like 3, 4, 5, 6 years old. They put them in a room with cookies fresh out of the oven, and they say these cookies. Half the kids they say these cookies are not for you. Leave them alone. And then they depart and they leave the kid alone with the cookies. The other half of the kids they say fresh cookies. You can have a few, and then they leave the room. Now all of the kids immediately have a cookie or two, or however many they can shove in their mouth. And then they interview the kids afterward and they ask them how the cookies tasted. The forbidden cookies taste better, always. So there is that the forbidden nature of it can elevate the high a little bit. I think that, some of the guys say, half the fun was getting away with it. So I think, yes, I don't think it's maybe the same high as the addiction. It's like a secondary benefit, maybe. Most of the guys actually feel guilty and remorseful and shameful about these hidden things, but some of them, um, and you mentioned swearing to themselves that they would stop. That would indicate that the person you're talking about here has some shame and some remorse and some regret. but the addiction is so powerful that he's still doing it. Um, so I don't know. I don't know that this is part of the addictive high. Maybe it's elevating the high if it's in the cycle. Tammy, what do you think? I mean, I'm
Well,
kind
I
of
was thinking I
torn
could
up.
see intensity, like I
Yeah.
could see the intensity, high risk intensity,
Mhm.
so to me, it's not necessarily the high, but there is, an elevation of intensity, and it may be, out of fear. How do I, and, many addicts think they're the smartest, person on the planet, and especially while they're getting away, and then they get caught, and then it's like, you know, so I would be cautious about perceiving that it's high. I would say there's an elevate, the high risk behaviors, there is an intensity about that, that is, different than and I don't want to like it like than a mundane relationship where it's normal and you're cooking dinner and taking out the trash and getting the car fixed, all of those things, because anything that is out there, whether it's a sex worker and transactional, or it's the like the person that said, oh, there's 10 people I've got, all of that is it's different. It's not real. Part of the, like Scott said, it's about fantasy and everything else. So, but I'd struggle probably calling the cover up a high. I have a feeling it's more, oops, I got to do, I got to make sure that I don't get caught, and especially if, I was there, I was like, I am not doing this again, please let me not do this again. And then the next day I would. My, my cycle of addiction was very short. I had, a 24-hour at best. It was probably more like 16, but anyway, but until I had the tools to be able to do life differently. And gratefully, since that time, when I got real help, I haven't, I've been able to choose today to not, you know, choose those behaviors. So, okay, Scott, I heard my husband speak to a fellow about how amazing it would be if he could have some weed to get high and order two prostitutes and act out. He was saying how amazing that experience was to me. It sounded like he enjoyed all of it, not just planning. Any thoughts?
Um, First of all, I just want to acknowledge how painful it must have
Painful. Yeah.
been for you to hear that conversation. And yeah, I mean, if you were upset, and I just want to validate whatever feelings you had when you heard that. So the question here is, to me, it sounded like he enjoys all of it, not just planning. Any thoughts? Um, well, I would say he was in the planning, and he was certainly enjoying the planning. Um, Look, and I will also say, in 25 years of active alcohol, drug, and sex addiction, um, there were some experiences that I really enjoyed. There were a few times where it lived up to the fantasy, um, but it was few and far between. Um, you know, so you know, maybe he has had an experience somewhere along the way in his addiction that really paid off the whole fantasy. But he's in the fantasy here. The fantasy is perfect. In the fantasy, the two prostitutes he gets are Julia Roberts and her sister from Pretty Woman. I mean, heart of gold, they're nice, they're sweet, they're not sex workers. And I mean, I have all kinds of compassion and empathy for sex workers, but they are not Julia Roberts in Pretty Woman. These are almost always troubled, traumatized, addicted themselves people. Um, you know, this is not likely to be the experience that he's fantasizing about. Um, so, my thoughts are, the fantasy is perfect. The actuality usually isn't. Um, but fantasizing about it sure sounds perfect. Tammy, thoughts?
Oh, I have lots of thoughts on this one.
Good.
So first of all, yeah, I acknowledge your pain, and I'm like, this is a person who is, holding on to old ideas. Like when
Yeah,
Scott said, there were some good times, and I was like, there probably were. Guess what?
we're
Those
we're
got
always
shuffled.
chasing
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah, and they were so few and far between, and I choose like those are filed so far back in the recesses of my brain like, even when he said that, I was like, nope, not even going there. I am not going to I don't need it. I need to remember that as a result of my addictive behaviors, most of it, particularly towards the end, was, highly problematic. And and caused me and my loved ones pain, and that's what I'm choosing to hang on to. So, would something be lovely? Now, I will fess up. There are times if my husband and I go out to dinner, amongst my addictive things, tequila happened to be one of the things I really like. And there will be moments when I say, please don't, if we're at a Mexican restaurant, please do not order, a margarita or whatever. And he acknowledges that and does it, and it's just, I don't need it around me, but I own that, like, it's me, it's not you. And he's okay, totally fine. So this is highly problematic to me, that this guy is, going down the path of like, oh, it'd be so great. That is, like, that would be all, we talk about the outer circle, the middle circle. I'd be like, that's the ring just outside the inner circle to me. Like, I would be very concerned. And so going back to what we said about healthy boundaries for you, what do you need to do to take care of you, with somebody who's, tripping out on, oh, it'd be so fun to do all those things, I like, if I have surgery, I gave up my right to have the good drugs. Like, I don't, I, and I choose that, and that's me, and people get to make their own choices. I just don't need it. I don't need that. I need enough to take the edge off, so I am highly, careful about where my thoughts go, what my actions are, because I'm not willing to give up what I've found in recovery. So either this person is very early in the process, or this person is, teetering on the precipice. So,
yeah, yeah, I
okay.
agree. It's old addictive thinking.
Yeah. Yeah. If, we're taught in 12 step that we think through, if I do whatever, it's not just this, all that fun. It's like, it's the, like the last person was saying, it's the cover up. I got to do all of those things. It's a lot of work, and and is it really going to be what I really think it is? No, it's going to be the sex worker, that you go, gosh, I hope I don't get a STD that I take home to my spouse, So, I mean, that's the reality. So,
yeah.
okay. My SAPA husband confessed to continuing to watch porn, but not as compulsively and not as much as he used to. He says he's continued to refrain from acting out in person. He sees this as progress. I see this as active addiction. Me too. If this is addiction, addict addiction, can you help me explain why this behavior is problematic? Because I don't know what is in his inner circle, but I have to believe that porn is in his inner circle. And this is like somebody going, well, I really drank a lot of whiskey, but now I'm only drinking beer. So it's not as bad as what I was doing. So therefore, you don't need to worry. This is still like our treatment program at, we're a non-smoke, non-vape facility, and people go, well, that's not my problem. Yes, it is part of it, because you're keeping that dopamine going. If he's continuing to look at, porn, he's keeping that dopamine going. We have guys that come to treatment who are just looking at porn. They don't act out sexually with another person, and it's problematic. And it's also like, another analogy is, an alcoholic goes, well, I'm only going to have one beer, like, and then the next, well, like, I didn't have any trouble with that, so now today I'm having two, and then it's the same thing. So it's all part of it. So this is somebody who is lying to himself, and I go back to, what do you need for healthy boundaries for you? Because I don't hear, that his sponsor has given him, this. I don't hear that his qualified therapist is doing this. Here's what I really recommend. Scott's starting another Sex Addiction 101 work group November 18th. That would be a really good, he'd have a 3-circle plan. He'd understand what sex addiction is and isn't. There'd be accountability. There'd be peers. He would get a lot of good information. And there's a betrayed partner work group that starts November 2nd. That would be a really good one for you. Healthy boundaries for you, getting more information too. So you can always email me, Tami, Tami, at seekingintegrity.com if you've got questions, but you'll see those posted on our website. So Scott?
Treating the addiction with the addiction does not, it just doesn't work. you know, it just doesn't work. You're not there. The neurobiology of addiction. We do things to the brain, and the brain must heal. And his brain is not healing. It can't heal because he is still acting out. I would love to have him in my sex addiction or porn addiction work group. Um, because these are the guys we got to break through this denial. It's like, dude, this is not working. Um, Progress, not perfection. I'm all in favor of progress, but you're still acting out. You're still drinking. You're still drugging. I mean, okay, I'm not shooting heroin anymore. I'm only snorting it. Okay, you're still doing heroin. Um, so yeah, and don't snort heroin.
Yeah.
We all
Yeah.
felt addiction. It doesn't go well.
Yeah. Yeah. Like we talk about, there are some guys that, masturbation can eventually be on the path for them. But Dr. Rob said, a while ago, addicts, porn, inner circle, like, and I don't know that there's any exception. And you know what? If he gets to the other side of this and he sees what life can be in Technicolor, he will want to choose the Technicolor, not the 1,000 images that just disconnect. So yeah, and this is a little bit of the garbage can. Scott talked about that too. Like this is the garbage can. You're somebody who's sober from alcohol for years and still doing porn and sex and or gaming and gambling. You know what? It's the same stuff. It's just a different form, but it's still doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Okay. Next question. How important is it for the spouse of the SA to understand the SA's arousal template? And is it generally healthy for couples in or out of recovery to understand each other's arousal templates and how they developed? Is this part of healthy couple communication, regardless of whether someone is in recovery?
This is an interesting question. This is
Yeah.
sort of like graduate level recovery stuff.
Yeah.
Um, I'm a big fan. Look, we're pro sex. I mean, we are not anti-sex here. I want people to have good, healthy sex. That's why I'm excited to teach the Healthy Intimacy and Sexuality Work Group in January. I think it's important that, I know what turns you on and you know what turns me on, and we can have a conversation about what am I willing to try? What are you willing to try? Can we push the envelope a little bit? Do we need a safe word? All of that stuff. From an addiction recovery standpoint, it's important that the addict understands his or her own arousal template. From in terms of the addict getting and staying sober, if the betrayed partner, I think would depend on the couple, how much you want to know, how much the addict is comfortable telling you at that point. This is probably something to be discussed in couples counseling. If there are problematic elements, and most sex addicts, especially heavy porn users, will uncover elements of their arousal template that they're not happy with. We learn things about ourselves looking at porn in particular that we wish we didn't know. Countless guys come to treatment. It's like, I've been looking at this and I can't stop. What do I do about it? First of all, you stop looking at it. They're like, yeah, but I don't want this in my arousal template. It's like, sorry, you can't unpickle a cucumber. I mean, when you're a pickle, you're a pickle. And when you know. But you don't have to act on everything in your arousal template. This is the conversation I usually have with addicts. Jamie, thoughts on the betrayed partner end of it and what they might want to know, what they should.
Yeah, I agree with you. This is not early in the process stuff, and even that and how it developed. Like the whys, can be interesting, but like I don't know if it's necessary. And I know a lot of betrayed partners who would be highly triggered if they knew all the gory details, like Scott was saying. So I think it's really, what are you comfortable learning? How important is it to and is there, the conversation can be about what are we comfortable doing and not doing. And
Right.
so I think it depends on what you, but I would absolutely navigate this with a qualified professional. This would be
Yeah.
this is way deeper stuff. And,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know,
The couples part of this conversation feels less about addiction and recovery and more about what do we want our sex life to look like.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
And if you're down the road and, you're a couple years in and solid recovery and healing, and, you feel like that this is something we're ready to explore, you can always take some steps towards it and see how it feels. And if it's working for you, great, but yeah, and how it developed, I like Scott said, a lot of stuff, it's there. It's just, whether you've uncovered it or not, so yeah, I think it's important for addicts to understand, and partners may have a better understanding already of, who they are from that standpoint. Okay, next question. The co-occurring compulsive behaviors and the whack-a-mole cycle is so grip holding on the addict and so destructive to watch as a betrayed partner that is now out of the house 7 months, separated from him, violating my boundaries and out of sight and out of cycle draining. As betrayed partner, how do you deal with watching their struggle? I'm doing all my work to stay healthy and heal, but I struggle with sitting as an outsider watching his pain and not helping. Oh, I hear you. And yeah.
yeah, go ahead, Tammy. I
Well,
mean,
yeah,
all I have
yeah.
to say is you can't get well for him as much as you want to.
I didn't cause it, I can't cure it, so yeah. And it's hard to watch, it is. So I'm a mother and grandmother, and I see things that kids and grandkids do, and if they're asking for my input, I'm happy to help and support, and when they don't, I don't. So they're all on their own journey, and it takes what it takes for an addict. And unfortunately, until the pain of change is less than the pain of staying the same, we don't change. We hang on to those compulsive behaviors, and it is self-destructive, and it's very painful to watch loved ones that are declining. So reminding yourself that he's choosing these behaviors, that I'm sure you've extended the lifeline before of there's help and hope, but until he chooses it for himself, it's keep shoring up your healthy boundaries for you.
Yeah, agree, totally.
Okay, the next one is, we are separated going towards divorce because my husband is not taking accountability and not doing recovery work on a consistent basis, and we have a few kids together ranging from 6 to 12. How and what do I tell the kids?
Separating, going to a divorce, not taking accountability. Okay. I would think that you and your partner need to sit down together, perhaps with the help of a therapist, and decide what are we going to tell the kids and how are we going to tell them. Always, it needs to be age appropriate. Your kids do not want the gory details. And what I will say is anything you say to your child cannot be unsaid. And if it's heavy news, they will remember it forever. So it isn't about blaming, it isn't about shaming, it isn't about one of us is the bad guy, one of us is the good guy. It's about there's a problem, we've been working on it, but neither of us is at a point where we feel that it's fixable. So we're going to divorce. We're still working on the problem. Um, you know, and that's probably, ages 6 to 12. Maybe the 12-year-old can know that it's an addiction of some kind and that it's dad, not mom, I'm assuming. Um, but more than that, I mean, and you and your husband, even if you're separating, need to have this conversation with the kids together. Um, and you should probably script it out before you go in and talk to them. But plan it with a couples counselor. Tammy, do you have extra thoughts there?
And I agree. And, we don't, no kids, even adults, want to know about their parents' sex life. So,
No.
yeah. So, and even using the word addiction, there's problematic behaviors within the relationship, and we both love you. This is not
Yeah.
you. they like affirming that you may have sensed, some struggles in the house. It's not you, nothing you did or didn't do, it's, and we absolutely love you and we want to support you, in this process. And hopefully both of you can show up for that. The caveat is making sure both of you can show up for that, because I
Mhm.
often hear one person is trying to get the kids on their side, and it both
Right,
ways, and puts the kids in a terrible
right.
situation where they have to choose, and it's traumatizing to them. So as the adults, I would invite you to be the adults and show up for your kids and prioritize them, not the bickering or any ill will between the two of you.
Yeah, and just to reiterate what Tammy just said, do not triangulate your children. Do not try and make them choose you over him. Your kids will resent that forever.
Well, and it hurts relationships. Even an addict is still, let's use gender dad, is still their dad, and
Yeah,
so and still can be dad, not an active addict is not going to be the dad, that the highest and best order, but still, and
yeah.
kids eventually figure things out,
Right.
when they get, but let them figure those things out, keep a
On their
safe
own.
space, yeah, where they can go, yeah, yeah. So supporting them, if there's been, drama and trauma, it may be helpful for them to see a qualified professional to support them too. So, oh, okay. So the next one, Scott, is, so does the fMRI of a sex addict who doesn't use cocaine still resemble a cocaine user's brain?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And doubly so if they're doing both. Plenty of sex addicts don't use coke. Their brain is indistinguishable from a cocaine addict's brain. Plenty of coke addicts are not sex addicts. The brains still look the same. So yes.
So I'm going to skip to the last one because this is a
Okay.
continuation of the one just before. My partner said, "Tell them whatever the f you want." He does not want to be there. So I'm really sorry. And so then it's, I mean, it's challenging to go. We are not in a good place, and he's got some work to do on himself, and I'm going to take care of me and take care of you, and yeah, and get good legal advice, make sure that you've got good legal support and emotional support for you too. So
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Okay, Scott, my partner of 35 years started with porn and online chats, then acted out sexually with a coworker. That has led to an 8-year affair and started using drugs. This affair partner is the only person he has acted out with. Is this still SA? I see a lot of compulsive behaviors he has.
Um, are we sure this affair partner is the only person he has acted out with? So that's my first question, and but I'm going to assume that it is because you say it is. 8-year affair using drugs, porn, online chats. This might be sex addiction. It might not be. It might just be, long-term infidelity. It hurts the same for you either way, I suspect. Um, the criteria we use to diagnose sex addiction are preoccupied to the point of obsession, which means I spend a lot of time and energy and thinking on this. Loss of control, which is usually multiple failed attempts to quit, or I'm only going to go online for 5 minutes, 5 hours later, I'm still online. And then negative consequences, which can be obvious things like, relationship woes, but it can also be, depression and shame and anxiety, et cetera, et cetera. So this may or may not be addiction. It would take a professional evaluation of him to find out. Um, but an 8-year affair, and now he's using drugs. I mean,
Well, and porn and
things are
online
going
chats,
porn and online
lots of
chats.
compulsive behaviors. I
Yeah.
like, we don't diagnose anybody. I threw the self-assessment in the chat. It's on our homepage on seekingintegrity.com. There's one for co-occurring chemicals and one for, sex and porn addiction. And those are not what we use for the guys that are coming into our residential program. It's far more comprehensive,
Yeah.
and we're looking at the underlying issues. But this is just gives you a little, thumbnails and stuff. So, and at the end of the day, eh, eh, regardless of what label, there's intimacy disorder and there's highly problematic, and you're a betrayed partner, and this will continue unless he gets help, because clearly things have gone on. And and, you know, I feel the pain with the, you know, with the 8-year affair. I think that's extra challenging. It's not helpful when it's a sex worker, but that's more transactional. But when there's a relationship that feels, you know, like extra betrayals, you know, for the partners, I think even worse if it's somebody you know. But in, you know, in a hashtag Me Too, you know, world, you know, like there's financial risk. I mean, there's so many, you know, layers of this that are like massive red flags of, you know, of problems. And you know, if he still doesn't get it, then again, what do you need to do to take care of you? You know, if he got fired at work because of this, you know, this becomes apparent and causes problems. Are you taken care of financially? Do you have, you know, all of those things so that you are being taken care of, you know, and you know, and and started using drugs. Like there's so much in here that goes
Yeah.
kind of, you know, quacks like a duck, feels like a duck,
Yeah.
you know. So
Yeah, it's certainly possible. And I just want to add, this is for anybody who's having an affair. Affairs are not real. Affairs are dinner out and hotel sex. That is not a real relationship. A real relationship is who's doing the dishes. You know, we have to pay the bills to get, that's a relationship. Affairs are not real relationships.
half the time they're not even dinner out. It's just
Yeah,
sex in the
and
car or a
you know,
closet or hotel room, you know.
there's research of people who, you know, they love their affair partner so much that they get divorced and then they marry the affair partner, and it's something like 90% of them are divorced again within 3 years.
Do you know how many affair partners reach out? Like, and if you were one, like, just know you're not alone because, you know, oh, we started off, you know, we were both married to other people, got
Yeah,
divorced, got together, and now, you
he's
know,
cheating
at least
again.
one of them is acting out, you know, and sometimes, but, you know, yeah, like unfortunately, that's the pattern because it's always, you know, the grass is greener on the other side where I don't have to do the dishes, I don't have to take out the trash, I can just, you know, it's just the high risk, high intensity stuff. So, but anyway, okay. Well, we're out of time. Thank you so much for all the great questions. And thanks, Scott, for being here again today. It's always fun when we get a chance to do these together. So, and this will happen again at some point. We just don't know when. So, all right. Take care, everybody. Bye
All
bye.
right, thanks.